Good morning, everyone. Happy Mother's Day to all you wonderful moms out there. I'm talking about moms, biological moms, step moms, foster moms, grandmothers, sisters, aunties, whoever's stepping into a mom role out there. And moms can be in many different guises and styles, but thank you for what you do for the young ones. Involved parenting is phenomenal and so important for young kids. Hi, Paul. Thanks for joining me. Father's Day is coming up, I think. My son asked me today, when's Father's Day? I said, I think it's in June. I've got no idea. Moms will tell you every day is Father's Day. But anyway, be that as it may. So happy Sunday. So today I've had a change of mind as to what I wanted to talk about today. I actually was going to talk about ego death and change. But I was prompted to put together this talk on the sky is falling, the tyranny of what ifs, based on a Facebook post I saw last night. And in that Facebook post, I didn't know how to take it. I felt quite sad reading it, but it was from a young lady who said that she had yesterday seen her parents and gone to go visit her parents, but stood at the gate, given a gift for today, and she was wishing how nice it would be to be able to hold her mom or spend Mother's Day with her mom, but she had chosen not to do so because of COVID, and the fact, when I asked her about it, the fact that she's currently working and she was scared that she might infect her parents with COVID because they are fairly old. So this prompted me to have a couple of thoughts and thinking around these terms of what ifs, because she had a what if in her mind. What if she infects her mom or her parents? And the other what if that I had was, what if her mom died before she had a chance of a heart attack or a stroke? My mom passed away quite a while ago, so it was quite sad that she couldn't, or had made a decision not to be able to spend the day with her parents because of lockdown and because of the rules around lockdown and the what if of infecting her mom. So without trying to take sides here or make a decision around what would happen, this prompted my thinking around what if and how sad it was where our thinking has gone based on COVID and lockdown. So I've put this talk together called The Sky is Falling, and if any of you know any of these kiddie stories, it's a wonderful story around Chicken Little, and I'm going to tell you the story of Chicken Little again, maybe with a slightly different ending. But Chicken Little is a story from 1840. I went and Googled it, and because this chicken, the sky's falling on my head, came to mind as to how we're responding. Many of us are responding to COVID and lockdown. But today I'm going to cover this. I'm going to use Chicken Little as a base or a foundation of my discussion today. Then I'm going to talk a bit about distorted thinking. I'm going to talk a bit about thought fusion. A lot of the stuff I've covered in previous sessions, but I'm just going to go into it in a little bit more depth. Then we're going to head into the what if category, this what if in my title. Then we'll talk about Schrodinger's cat, which you may or may not have heard about. And then we will end up on concluding today's session. But let's start with Chicken Little. So if any of you recall Chicken Little was a very little chicken, a tiny chicken in fact. But Chicken Little had developed quite a following because Chicken Little, certainly people perceived Chicken Little to be very wise. Why? Because Chicken Little was quite opinionated. Chicken Little always had an answer for everything. Hi Sean, hi Patrick, thanks for joining us. So Chicken Little developed quite a following in the farmyard. So people would go to him with any sort of question, and Chicken Little always had an answer for everything. So because of his following, he was quite respected, and people believed Chicken Little to be a lot wiser than what they were. Then one day Chicken Little happened to be sitting having his lunch under a tree, and while he was having his lunch all by himself, a squirrel came across the top of a branch above him and dropped one of its acorns, and the acorn landed on Chicken Little's head. But it bounced off his head and went into a little hole in the tree. So there was no acorn lying around. Chicken Little got a tremendous fright, looked all around him to go, what the hang was that? Couldn't work out what was going on, couldn't find anything lying around him. He thought, well, maybe it was a leaf, but couldn't see any leaves lying on the ground. Then thought possibly it could be an acorn or something out of the tree, but there was no acorn lying around. So then Chicken Little, through his own process of deduction and following his own reasoning, decided the sky must be falling on his head. This freaked him out, and he said, I have to go tell the king. So he jumped up and ran off to tell the king. And on the way there, he bumped into Henny Penny. And Henny Penny says, what's going on? Why are you looking so stressed? So Chicken Little said to Henny Penny, the sky's falling on my head. We've got to go and tell someone. And Henny Penny said, well, how do you know? He said, no, something fell on my head and there was nothing around. It said it had to have been the sky. So Henny Penny says, no, well, that's crazy. We've got to go tell the king. Can I come with you? Cool. So off they go. they bump into Ducky Lucky, and Ducky Lucky says, "Where are you guys going?" So Henny Penny and Chicken Little said, "We off to see the king because the sky fell on my head." And Henny Penny adds a bit to the story and said a huge chunk of the sky fell on his head and knocked Chicken Little flying. So off they go, bump into Goosey Woosey, tell him the story. She goes, "Where are you guys going?" "No, we're off to tell the king the sky's fallen on Chicken Little's head and it's going to collapse on all of us. We're all going to die. We have to go to the king." So Goosey Woosey joins them. Sooner or later, Turkey Lurkey's up in there. So the four of them, Turkey Lurkey, Henny Penny, Ducky Lucky, and Goosey Woosey, are all with Chicken Little, and off they go. Now, as you know, the ending to the story is not a very pleasant ending, but we have a choice. So they arrive at a Y junction. I'm going to add the choice because apparently now the modernized version of Chicken Little, not all these animals die. But who should be standing at the Y junction but Foxy Loxy? So he says, "Where are you guys going? You look like you're in a mighty rush." So they say, "We're off to see the king because the sky's fallen on Chicken Little's head and we've got to go tell the king about this." So Foxy Loxy says, "Well, I know a shortcut. Follow me." So if you want the bad ending, they all follow Foxy Loxy to their shortcut, and he says they must come one at a time into his hole, which is sort of takes them in a shortcut, and one by one he eats Goosey Lucy, Henny Penny, Ducky Lucky, and Chicken Little, sorry. And some versions of it have got him as Chicken Licken. But so they all die if they took that path. But our path is going to go a slightly different way. So they decide, "No, thank you, Foxy Loxy. We're not going to go the shortcut. We know the way to the king." So off they go to the king. They get to the king, who's obviously this wise gentleman. So they sit down there. They arrive there. The king says, "What's up? You guys look stressed." Chicken Little says, "The sky's fallen on my head." So the king says, "Well, how do you know that? And that the sky fell on your head?" So Chicken Little says, "Because I've always got an answer, and I know I'm quite opinionated. I always have an answer, and I can work these things out." So the king says in a wise manner, "Do you have a piece of the sky that fell on your head?" So Chicken Little goes, "No, I don't. I've got no proof that the sky fell on my head, but something did, and I looked around and there was nothing there." So the king says to him, "Well, let's go and have a look at the tree." So he goes back with Chicken Little all the way to the tree. They look all around there. As they get there, the squirrel comes across the top of the branch and says, "Hey guys, did any of you see I'm missing an acorn?" And then the king goes, "You see." And then they start looking for this acorn, and true as nuts, they find the acorn inside the hole. And the king says, "There, the sky's not going to fall on your head. It's all going to be okay." So this is the end of the story. So the reason I tell this story at the beginning, because this is the tyranny of what ifs. Okay, so we make our own conclusions. So I'm going to jump in now into the part about distorted thoughts. Hi Sonia, thanks for joining us. So we have a number of distorted thinking patterns, okay, and we call them automatic negative thought systems, ANTS, automatic negative thought systems. Automatically our minds will go into these distorted thinking patterns, and probably the majority of us use these because they're instant, they're quite impulsive, they're quite reactive thinking patterns. And of course the most important, and even if we use, I'm sort of telling this story or sharing this presentation amongst the backdrop of COVID, amongst the backdrop of lockdown. So the first distorted thinking pattern that comes out here, same with, and using Chicken Little's story as another metaphor, is magnification or catastrophization. So we make this huge thing. Acorn, hi Greg, Brent, sorry, I'm greeting myself here, Brent Rudolph in Cape Town. So this acorn falls on this chicken's head and he blows it out of proportion. So it's a huge magnification, okay, of the skies falling on his head. Then we have black and white thinking. Black and white thinking means that if I'm opinionated, my opinion is going to be the right one because there can only be right or wrong. So if I thought the sky's falling on my head, it must be falling on my head. And we're going to touch on thought fusion just now, but that's the black and white thinking. Then we have fortune telling. Now the fortune telling is the other part where we now assume that if one piece fell on my head, that the whole sky must be falling down or going to happen. And this sort of ties in with the fortune telling that if I see my parents, the parents will get COVID, for example. So we start telling the future when we don't know what the future holds. And I'll talk about Schrodinger's cat now to sort of illustrate that point. And then on top of fortune telling becomes herd mentality. So Chicken Little first tells Henny Penny, then the two of them go and tell the third one. Suddenly you've got 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, 6 people. Now a whole lot of people are telling the same story with added versions onto it of how the sky is falling on their heads. And suddenly everyone believes the same story, or the majority of people believe the same story. Fortunately, in my story, they didn't go down Foxy Loxy, otherwise they all would have died because he would have taken them down into his hidey hole. The other part about Chicken Licken, which is the nice part of the ending where the king is there and no one gets eaten, is the king decides to fact check. And he decides to go and check on some of these things. And not only fact check his belief system, but to read broadly and go and understand, and to be a wise king to see a broader version of this. Now, the other problem that happens when we think things, the minute we think things, and we've discussed this in other sessions, especially if I'm a black and white thinker, I assume my thinking is right, so we believe it is fact, we believe it is wise, and we believe it's a command. So if the sky's falling on my head, I have to go and tell the king, okay? Or if someone told me this, that this is going to happen this way, I must do that because I've been told this. Without having to fact check, I just follow, I don't check on the information. So with thought fusion, we've got to be very careful, because instead of thinking maybe my parents might get COVID or maybe this might happen, the statement becomes they will get it. So it becomes a fact. So we've got to be careful, and I'm going to step into the what ifs. So with all these what ifs, or the tyranny of what ifs, and also someone on one of my pages, I'm not sure if you're watching today, I can't remember, but I see someone said, well, what about, because I've made some post about positive thinking, or having a positive outlook rather, and someone said, but what about rationality? And I said, well, it is rational that a plane can fall out of a sky. It's quite rational that if you get on an aeroplane, there's a chance that the aeroplane can crash and you're going to die. That's rational. But being positive is saying, well, I'm going to get on the aeroplane and fly anyway because it may or may not fall out the sky. Yet we still get on aeroplanes, and aeroplanes crash every day. 300 people die when an aeroplane crashes, but we still get on that aeroplane. Another great illustration is, I'm sure we've all had mothers or wives or someone in our family has said, please don't run with that stick, or don't run with the scissors, or don't run with the knife. Okay? And I had this incident with the person, the child had a dowel, and the dowel is about 1 centimeter big, and was, don't run with that, it's going to stick you in your eye. And an argument ensues around the fact that the stick can go in the child's eye. Now, the argument from a perspective is, yes, but the child can fall and the stick can go in its eye. And that answer to that question is yes, it can. It's the same as, can a plane fall out the sky? And the answer is yes. Okay, but the stick going to the eye, if you put dots all over the person's body, there's probably going to be 1 in 10,000 chances that the stick will go in the child's eye. Okay, and if you add every single infinite space around that child's body, it's going to be a 0.00001% of it going in the child's eye. So to a rational person or a black and white thinker, the argument is, if the child runs with a stick, it will go in the child's eye because it can, so therefore the child should not run with a stick. Not putting into it a bigger perspective, or stepping back rather, and having to look at the broader version of it. And this is where we talk about just trying to call for calm, or a helicopter view of just some psychological distance. And we can have 100 stories like that. You know, if we go without our mask, we're going to get COVID. And if we get COVID, we will die. And my challenge is that even these leaders that have given us all this information, they've never ever said everyone will die. They've always said there's a low percentage of dying. They've always said those with compromised immune systems will die. But the majority of us have now taken this to heart, and everyone who gets it will die. And because we are being bombarded daily with these huge figures, we are starting to get really, really scared, which is why yesterday's one talk was around the fear of fear itself. So we need to just think calmly, because this anxiety is pushing people way over the limit with what they can and cannot do. Like the story of the lady with her mom, you know, not being able to hold her mom. And the risk for me is, my what if is, what happens if she dies? Okay, and before you've had a chance to hug her. You can't wait 2 years. There's never going to be a safe time. So we need to hug our moms today, you know, if we can. And then to jump from the what ifs into Schrodinger's cat. If any of you know, I'm going to give you a version. There's a lot of different versions of Schrodinger's cat that Einstein brought out around dynamite or bomb in it. But essentially, Schrodinger's cat says you have a box or a bunker, and inside that bunker is a cat. And the version I know is, forget about the dynamite, is there's a cyanide capsule in there, and then there's a lid on this box. Inside the box, the cat either eats the cyanide capsule and dies, or it doesn't eat the capsule and lives. But we do not know that. You only know that once you open the box and look inside the box. In other words, inside the box, the cat is both living and dead. So there's a 50% chance that the cat ate the cyanide capsule and died, and there's a 50% chance the cat didn't eat it and didn't die. But we don't know that until we look inside the box. So to say, I'm not going to get on an aeroplane because it's going to crash out the sky, has a truth to it. But there's just as much truth that the plane is not going to crash and you're not going to die. And we don't know that until we know it. So we should never get ahead of ourselves, and we shouldn't fortune tell and shouldn't jump to conclusions or make assumptions about what may or may not happen. We must take precautions. So, I often think when you get on an airplane, they tell you put the seatbelt on. It's not going to help you much if the plane falls out of the sky, but the seatbelt does give us a small feeling of some sort of safety. So the reason I'm saying we need to be a lot calmer is because if you remember one of our talks on, I think we did a little thing around EQ, we spoke about the swing emotions. Now the swing emotions had a lot of energy around them, which is exactly what's going on now. So high energy, meaning quite stressed, we'd be quite vocal, we'd fight a lot, or we're going to withdraw. And those swing emotions were things like fear, anger, and frustration, and anxiety. Well, anxiety and fear are very similar. So those emotions are going to make you have quite a lot of energy, so it'll certainly be a lot hyped, and but your focus is going to narrow tremendously, which doesn't give you many options. And too long in this kind of a situation, and you're going to end up with depression, dejection, and those kind of blue emotions where now you have low energy and a low focus. So we want to use that energy of anxiety to make a decision around moving towards what we call the high performance emotions, which was optimism, enthusiasm, confidence, and resilience, or hardiness. So I think to bring this whole story around sort of into some sort of a conclusion, I want you guys to please just remember that when we think something, when we have this thought fusion, and maybe just to quickly jump into thought fusion again around that quicksand metaphor. If any of you were there when we spoke about quicksand, it's a wonderful metaphor, but quicksand sucks you down, and the more you panic with quicksand, the quicker it sucks you in. The more you calm in quicksand, you start to sink slower. And the only way to get out of quicksand is to expose more of your body to the quicksand. So lie flat down, then pull your legs out and sort of roll out. So when we're going through panic, when we're going through anxiety and these emotions that we don't want to feel, we need to lean into them rather than running away from them. By leaning into them, we give them more space, we calm down, we don't freak out, and we don't try and run away from that emotion, but we allow that emotion to be there. This allows us to broaden our problem-solving perspective of how do we solve this particular problem. So when I say, when we're thinking about something, to take a breath, we did it in another session as well, where I said, just think of a stop sign. And the stop sign was S for stop, T for take a breath, O for open up, give yourself some space to feel what you're feeling, and then to pause and to plan the next move. All right, so this is what we need to do rather than rushing in blindly into making these rash decisions. And before, when COVID first started coming out onto the scene, I kept on Facebook, I have never changed my refrain, which was always about, guys, we need to remain calm, 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 because the minute you start panicking, we start making these random decisions around, which are not always effective decisions. And no one really knows. And even our bosses don't, our leaders don't even know how to make these right decisions because they don't have anything to work on. So everyone's making, arguably, some panic decisions with science behind it, but we need to still try and make rational decisions for ourselves. Then we spoke about, just in conclusion, to sort of diffuse from your emotions and defuse from your thinking rather than holding on to it. So step back, take a breath, like I said, find your centers. And the session's not today is not around what do we need to do there. It's more to sort of just educate you around this broader thing of what ifs, or the tyranny of what ifs, and to start challenging your thinking a bit, and to not to miss out on opportunities that are right around us because of our anxieties. Okay, so lastly, we use that hurricane metaphor. We are in a tumultuous time. We're in the hurricane. If you don't find your centers, it's just going to keep blowing you around and buffeting you around. There is not going to be a simple end to this. I think it's going to go up, down, up, down, up, down. In South Africa, they're talking about going back to zone level 5 and then back to 4 and move us around. So I think unless you have your center, and this week I keep talking about ad nauseum, and I think tomorrow or the next day we'll talk about this thing about ego death, because one of the biggest things we fear is change. And I'm going to talk about change and change management. So thank you. Have a wonderful time with your families today. Those of you that are spending time with your families, if you can't see them, use the virtual means, but hopefully you can hug your mom if she's around, and you're not going to be scared to hug your mom. So take precautions. Thank you and have a wonderful day.